Once you start generating a static website using org mode's publishing system, the next thing you'll probably want to know is how to publish the site so that other people can check it out. In this video, you'll learn how to set up automatic publishing of your org mode website every time you push a commit to your Git repository. Stick around to learn more. So if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to click the like button below and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Both of those things help a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And also, if you really enjoy the content that I make on this channel, see the links below to support the channel. There's various different ways you can do that, and I would really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. So to get started, make sure you have an account on one of the websites that we'll talk about today, either GitHub or SourceHut. On GitHub, it's free to create an account and do everything that we'll talk about on this video, and you can create an account at the link github.com/join. It's also free to create an account on SourceHut, but recently they've had to require payment to use their build service because crypto miners have once again ruined the party for everyone. So fortunately, you can sign up with a maintainer account for as little as $2 per month. I definitely recommend paying for that service if you like it, because it's a very good service. And you can sign up at the link below. There's also other ways you can get free service on SourceHut, so check out this entry on their billing fact for more details on that. Like if you basically write a blog post or make videos about SourceHut, you might be able to get free service. So which one should you choose? Well, both of them are great options, and it's going to be similarly easy to publish sites on both of them. Excuse me. GitHub is the well-known mainstream option. And it doesn't really hurt to have an account there, especially these days where people treat GitHub as if it's like a social network for programmers. So it doesn't hurt to have one there. Also, SourceHut is a more hacker-focused site with totally different philosophy that you might appreciate as probably someone who enjoys free software and that kind of thing. And you can learn more about SourceHut by checking out their website at sourcehut.org. But be aware that there are some restrictions about what kind of content that you can publish on SourceHut Pages, a website that's hosted by SourceHut. It basically just boils down to not having any kind of external JavaScript or analytics trackers or things like that. So check that page that I have linked here for more details about that. So for either hosting site, you're going to need a repository where you store your org mode website's content files and the build script that we created in the previous video of this series. So if you haven't seen that video yet, check it out here. It's called Build Your Website with Org Mode. In that video, I show you how to basically set up the basic publishing script for an org mode based website and to produce the output HTML files. So we'll be starting from the code in the org website example repository that I've created in that video. So you might want to clone that repository and then create a new folder on your file system and then copy those site files into it as a starting point if you haven't done it already. So I'm going to give you a little bit of tips on how to set up that repository. I'm not going to go into depth about how to use Git in this episode, but I'm going to give you a brief rundown of the commands that you're going to need to know to turn your site files into a Git repo and then commit the changes so that they are stored as a commit in your Git repository so they can be pushed to this remote hosting service. So what I'm going to do is start off with, I've created a directory called my org site. You can see some of those commands here in the notes I'm giving. I also should mention this is very Linux or Mac OS focused. If you know how to use Windows, you can probably translate these same commands to Windows if you need to. So I'm in the my org site folder. I also have the org website example folder here as well. So what I'm going to do, let's see, don't think I have anything here. Yeah, so I'm going to copy all the files from the org website example into this folder. So now I should have my buildsite.el file, build.sh, and then also the content folder that has the actual org content files for the website. So now that we have all these things here, we can type git init, and that will initialize a repository in this folder. And then to add all of the files that we just added to this folder to be committed, we can use git add and then -A. And what that's going to do is stage all the files to be committed, but they haven't actually been committed yet. So there's like your working files where you've made edits, and then there's the staging area where you basically add those files to the staging area so that you say these are the ones that I want to commit, and then you run the next command, which is git commit, that will create the commit from those files. So I'm going to run git commit -m for specifying the commit message. Then I'm going to say my first commit, and that's going to create a commit for the files that we just added in, and that's a good starting point for everything going forward. Now, every time that you make changes to your website, Great, this is not closing. Every time you make changes to your website, you can go to your My Org Site folder that we created just now and run the same commands again, that git add -A, and then git commit -M, and then whatever commit message you want to add for that commit. So that's basically how you're going to write the content for your site and then commit it to your repo, and then we'll talk about pushing that to the remote repository in a little bit. And that's sort of the process that you'll use for publishing new content to your website. And then some of the things that we'll do later will take care of automating the process of producing the HTML files and then publishing them so that they're visible to other people. So if you don't know a whole lot about Git, I'm going to assume that you probably know a little bit, at least on this channel. But if you don't know much about Git, I recommend reading the Git book, and you can find it by this link below. If you're a beginner to Git and you want to learn more about how to use it and also understand some of the concepts behind it. And at some point in the future, I'll do a series for beginners to Git, but for now, the Git book is a good resource for those of you who need to learn a bit more about it. All right, so now we can try to create a hosted repository from which we will actually publish our website. I'm going to show you how to do this both on GitHub and on SourceHut. So assuming you've already created your GitHub account, you can now create a repository for your website called whatever your username is .github.io. And that's actually the name that you need to use for your repository, because apparently this is the convention that GitHub uses to, I guess, detect a personal website that you create as a repository. So you can go to github.com/new and then create a public repo with this name, making sure to use your actual GitHub username in the title of the repo. Don't just call it your username.github.io. And also, we're not going to select any of the checkboxes that shows us. We're going to just push our own local repository to GitHub once that repo is created. So I'm at the home screen for my fake GitHub account. I'm going to click Create Repository here, which will take me to that new page like I mentioned before. I'm going to type in my username, davywill-2.github.io. I'm going to leave the description blank for now. I'm going to leave this as a public repo because I think that's a requirement for publishing websites, and I'm not going to check any of these boxes. Then I'm going to click Create Repository. And now you have a repo for your website set up. And then we can add the repository as what's called a remote for your local Git repo by using one of the following commands. And a remote basically is a link to a repository somewhere else. So in this case, we're going to say our GitHub repository that we just created is the remote called Origin for our Git repository. Origin, I don't know why that came as the name, but that is sort of like the common name for your main remote repository in a Git repo. So what we're going to do is add, using git remote add, we're going to add a remote called Origin using one of these two URLs. The first one is just an HTTPS link. And the second one is one that requires you to use SSH to connect to it. And which one of these you use really depends on how you need to authenticate to GitHub. And if you don't know what that means, I recommend checking out this documentation page because it can be a little tricky to set up if you've never done it before. So this documentation page will show you the various different ways to set up authentication to GitHub so that whenever you try to push your commits to GitHub, it will automatically authenticate correctly. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with the HTTPS version here. You can actually copy this link directly by clicking this little button over to the right-hand side. And then I'll go into the shell and then do exactly what I mentioned before, which is to say git remote add origin. And I think I've already got some of these commands in my history, so they show up immediately. So I'm going to add that as my origin, and now that should be there. And then once I've set up that origin, the remote, I can use the git push command to push my local commits in the master branch, which is the default branch that Git creates, to the origin remote. So I'm going to type in, I don't know why that showed up, git push origin master in the shell. And that's going to push these commits after it asks me to authenticate. So I'm going to authenticate right now. Oh, actually, let me do this in vterm. I think there's an issue with eShell sometimes. So I'm going to use git push origin master. I'm going to type in my username, which is davywill2, and then I'm going to copy over a personal access token that I have here and paste it in because I don't have it set up correctly. Okay, so let me try one more time here. I may have copied the token. Whoops. Okay, well. It doesn't matter. I'm going to delete this token right after this video anyway, so if you see it, it doesn't matter. Okay. Authentication failed. Wonderful. Anyway, I just got the site pushed. As I mentioned before, it can be a little bit tricky to authenticate with GitHub on the command line. And as you can see, I had a little bit of trouble with it here. However, if you're on Windows and you install the Git credential store or whatever it's called, it makes it a lot easier because there's actually a pop-up that shows up to put in your GitHub username and password and authenticate the right way. Using the approach that I just did on Linux is trickier than using the SSH key-based approach. So definitely consider your different options and try to get things set up the right way so you don't run into problems like I just did while trying to make this video. However, I just did get it published, so I think we're good to go for now, and we'll see if we have any further issues as I continue forward. So our repository, if I reload this page, we now have the master branch with the first commit that I just created, and it's got all the same files there that we're looking for, so that's great. We're done to basically creating the initial repo on the GitHub side. Now, for SourceHut, you can create a new repository by going to the following link, git.sr.ht/create. And on SourceHut, it does not actually require you to have a specific name for your repository to host a website because they use a different approach to publishing sites there, which I find to be quite nice. Just make sure that you set up your SSH key first in their account settings, since this is the only way to authenticate with SourceHut for pushing a Git repository. So if you're on Linux or Mac OS, you know how to do this already, but if you don't, you can consult the links on GitHub actually for how to set that up, because it's basically the same on both sites. You just create a local SSH key and then copy your public key to SourceHut or GitHub to then let them know that you will be authenticating using that key, and then you should be able to push using the git@git.sr.ht URL path. So what we're going to do is go over to SourceHut and create a repository here. I'm going to click Create New Repository, and I'm going to call it My Org Site. And I'm going to make it public, but I think that it can be private if you want it to on SourceHut, so that may be a plus for you for SourceHut if you want to do it that way. I'll click Create, and now there will be an empty repository here called My Org Site. So what I'm going to do now is copy this, and I'm going to add this as a secondary remote. Obviously, if you're only going to use SourceHut for publishing your site or pushing your repository to a Git host, you can call it Origin. I'm going to call it something different because now it will allow me to have two different remotes. I could push both to GitHub or SourceHut if I wanted to, but for you, you'll probably just call it Origin. So in my case, I'm going to paste this in, and then I'm going to rename this to SRHT, and then I'm going to change this username to David Will because that's the right place for that. And now I should just be able to do git push srht master. And since I'm using SSH authentication, it just pushed it right away without any trouble on my part because it knows which key to use and my account's already set up to use that. So if we go back to the repo and refresh it, now we see my first commit is there. We can click tree here to see the various files that are here also. So I've got this repository pushed to two places now, but that's only for demonstration purposes. You would probably pick one or the other of these sites. You would not push to both of them, basically. All right, so SourceHut allows you to publish pages for a personal website, which would be your username.srht.site, or any custom domain that you choose using a simple HTTP-based API. And when I say that, I mean the HTTP-based API is used for publishing your pages. It doesn't matter whether you use the personal website address or a custom domain. We'll talk about custom domains a little bit later. And if you want to learn more about SourceHut Pages, you can check the quick start instructions and the documentation. I have these links below here. You can find them in the show notes. Okay, so now we can set up a build configuration on both of these sites that will automatically publish your website every time you push a commit to your repository. And this is sort of the biggest, most important part of this video. We can basically automate this whole process of publishing our website. So this is possible by using a continuous integration service like GitHub Actions or SourceHut Builds. This type of service enables you to run a build script for your repository on a machine in the cloud so that you can do things like run tests on code or publish a website. So I'll show you an example build configurations for both GitHub and SourceHut so that you can copy and paste them to get started, but only with a couple of small tweaks to the SourceHut config because it does require you to change a couple things related to the name of your website and the name of your repository. So for GitHub Actions, we're going to create a YAML file. If you haven't seen YAML before, it's basically a text-based data format that's very human readable and writable, so it's very nice to work with. We're going to create a file called publish.yml, inside of the .github/workflows folder of the repository. So I will go ahead and start that up. I'll go to my temp/my org site folder .github/workflows/publish.yml. And then I'm going to save it and tell it yes to create the folder. So now we've got a blank file here. And now I'm going to copy over the contents of this, configuration, and I'll tell you what it does. All right, so we're naming the publish config, or sorry, the build configuration publish to GitHub Pages. That's a name that will show up on the actions page of your repo whenever this job runs. And we're setting it to be triggered anytime you push commits to the master branch. Now, I think by default with Git command line, if you initialize a new repository, it's going to create the master branch by default. However, if you create the repo on GitHub first and then sync that repo locally and then start making changes to it, the default these days for GitHub is to create a branch called main. So depending on what your main branch is, whether it's called master or main, you need to make sure that you put it here in this configuration so that the builds get triggered from the right place. Otherwise, you're going to keep pushing changes and nothing's going to happen. So just make sure you have the right branch there. Next, we're going to set up an Ubuntu VM as Ubuntu latest, whatever the latest long-term stable release is. I believe it's probably 20 or 21 at this point, not exactly sure. And then it's going to check out your code for this current repository onto that VM so that it can be built and used. Then we're going to install Emacs using apt install. We're going to install the Emacs-nox package, which basically pulls down the non-graphical version, or in other words, the terminal version of Emacs, and install it so that we can use it to run org mode. And then we're going to run our build.sh script that we created in the previous episode so that it will run Emacs, tell org mode to publish our site files, and then produce that output folder called public, which has all the .html files in it. And then lastly, what we're going to do is use a community action called the GitHub Pages deploy action. And what that will do is it will try to look at the local folder we have called public, which is the thing that we generated after the build.sh script ran, and then commit it into the GH Pages branch. And this is another convention of GitHub where personal GitHub Pages sites typically have a GH-Pages branch where the actual HTML files for the site reside. So you don't have to worry about doing any of this work yourself. This action takes care of it for you. It will commit your HTML files to that branch so that GitHub Pages will then share that on your actual personal website, which is great. So let's see, let's save this and we'll go back to the slides. Anything else interesting there? Yeah, I don't think so. So one other thing I will mention, I think it's Emacs 26.3 at the time of this recording, but that's okay because all the stuff that we have been doing so far in the build script for our org-based website works just fine in Emacs 26.3, so you should not have any problems there. So add this file to your repository folder, commit it, and then push it to your GitHub repository using the commands that I had showed you before. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to git add -a to add all the currently pending files in the folder. If I type git status, it will tell me that I added this new GitHub workflows publish.yml file. I'll use github commit, git commit -m, add GitHub Actions configuration. And now I will type git push origin master. My GitHub repo is at the origin remote, so I'm going to push it there. And let me copy this password again, and fingers crossed that we don't have any weird issues because I had plenty of trouble last time doing this. Okay, great. This time it pushed it just fine. So now I'm going to go back to the GitHub repository. I'm going to refresh this page. And now at this commit, you can see there's this little orange circle icon right next to the commit hash. If you click that, it will tell you that it's running the publish to GitHub Pages job. If you click details on that, it will give you an actual output page giving you all of the output of whatever is happening inside of your publish job. So you should be able to track the progress of it here. All the names of the tasks here correspond to what we had written in our publish.yml file. So you should be able to tell exactly what's going on. So at this moment, we're installing Emacs. And then as soon as that finishes, it's going to run that build.sh script to generate the site. And then lastly, it will publish the generated contents to GitHub Pages. So we'll wait just a second, and I think it's about to complete. And there it is. So it took probably about, 35 seconds to complete that job. And that's basically what it's going to do every time you push a commit to your repo. It's just going to run through this whole process of pushing the changes to your GH Pages branch so that they get surfaced on your website. Now, we have to do a little bit of extra work to set this up so that the site is visible. So what we need to do is go to the Settings tab on our repo and click the Pages tab on the left-hand side. So I'm going to click Settings. And then if you go down a little bit here, there's a Pages tab on the left-hand side. And it says your site is published at davidwill-2.github.io. That's typically how it works, is that your username.github.io is the place where your site will be published. However, it says 404, file not found. But that is to be expected because we have not finished configuring it yet. Here in the source section of this page, we need to click on the branch and then select GH Pages, because that's the place where those files got pushed whenever the GitHub action ran. And we're not going to change the path here because these files actually do get checked in at the root of the repository. So all we need to do here is just click Save, and now it should change how it tries to find those files for our website. Now, if we refresh the page, it's going to take a little bit for it to finally wake up and show those files, because GitHub has to do some things behind the scenes to gather the files in the right place and then and show them. But I think if I just, wait just a second, maybe click the link again, eventually, let me see if I can clear my cache. If I refresh again. Yes, sometimes it takes a minute or so. It really just depends on how bogged down GitHub is at any given moment. We'll go back and check on that a little bit later. In the meantime, we'll set up the SourceHut build and then go back and check this. All right, so for SourceHut, there is a similar type of YAML file that you have to create. It's in a different location. It's in the root of your repository called .build.yml. And here's what it does. Well, let's actually copy the file first, and then I'll tell you what it does. So I'm going to go back to my temp / my org site folder, type in .build.yml, and then I'll save that file. I'll go back. I'll grab this configuration. And then, and then I'll go back into my build.yml file, paste that in. Okay, so what this configuration does is it starts an Arch Linux VM in the cloud. It installs the Emacs-NoX package, similar thing as before. We're installing the terminal version of Emacs. We're using this special OAuth setting to say, for this job, we want to have a special token that will allow us to authenticate to the SourceHut Pages service. So you don't need to do anything special to set up a key for publishing. Just having this one setting right here takes care of that for you. For sources, this is one thing you will have to change yourself. The way that builds work on SourceHut is that a build is not attached to a particular repository necessarily. You actually have to say which repositories you want to clone as part of your build. So I'm going to change this to David Will. And you need to change this to be whatever your username is / whatever the name of your site repository is on SourceHut. Also, you need to change this environment site variable to have your username as well, because the default publishing location for personal sites on SourceHut Pages is your username.srht.site. So once you've changed those things, you're most of the way there. The only last thing you need to make sure you change is this line right here. So if you have a different name for your website repository, which I do recommend because this is kind of a lame name, you need to change this cd command to cd into the name of the repository, because what happens is that SourceHut's build system will clone your repository to the local machine, but it will clone it into the actual directory name for the repo. So you need to use cd to get into that folder so that you can run the build script and have things be generated in the right place. So once you've changed that, then everything else stays the same. What we're doing is basically running the build script. Then we create a compressed archive out of all the files from the public folder. And then the last step is this upload step where we create well, that's interesting. I don't know why I'm doing it twice here, but I think we're extracting or something. I'm not sure. But we call this a curl command, which is a special command on SourceHut. And we say that we want to publish that tarball to the website. I think that's actually not necessary here. I probably did that because I was trying to debug something. So let's just take that part out. So this will publish that tarball to your SourceHut Pages site. So it's very short configuration. We're going to just try to commit that and then run it. Let me actually check and make sure there's nothing else I want to say about this here below. Yes. All right. So what we're going to do is commit that file. So I'm going to use git add -a and then git commit -m add SourceHut build configuration, and then git push SRHT master. And I'm using SRHT here because I named my SourceHut remote SRHT. And now we pushed it there. And you can actually go to your builds page on SourceHut now. If you click builds at the top, and you should see that there is a build that gets created from that commit. And it will run just the same way as it does on GitHub Actions. It will give you a log of everything that happens. And then once everything finally completes, it will try to publish that website. So right now it's doing the installation of Emacs. It's running the build script. The build script is calling it to Melpa to pull down all the packages. It finished building the build. Let's see if it will actually publish successfully. Upload is successful, so it took about 27 seconds. So on either of these sites, the CI job will complete fairly quickly, even though you are installing Emacs and installing all the dependencies of your build script at the same time. So pretty nice that you have that ability to just do that in about 30 seconds each time you push to your repository. So now I'm going to go to davidwill.srht.site. And now we should see that there is a website posted there, and that is the actual org example site from the previous episode. Now, I already had a site posted here from this because I was trying this out before. So it may take your website maybe a minute or two to show up. So don't be alarmed if it does take a little bit of time. Let's actually go back and check the GitHub page too and see if that showed up finally. This time it did not show up for me immediately. So let me just change this one more time and see if I can jog its memory. So I'm going to save master, and then I'm going to go back to GH Pages again and save that. So if I click on this link, well, finally it shows up. Okay, so sometimes you have to toggle it a little bit, but in this case, finally it did show up. So we did publish our org mode example site successfully, which is awesome. Now, one thing I will mention, you can see here that on GitHub, we have the actual styled version of the page that we had from the last video, but on SourceHut, we do not have it. And the reason why is because SourceHut blocks any requests to external resources like CSS files, JavaScript files, etc. And that's part of what I was telling you before, that there are restrictions to using SourceHut, where they will keep you from doing certain things that you can do freely on other hosting services. So just keep that in mind. If you need any kind of resources on your website, you need to check them into your repository also, like CSS files, JavaScript files, anything like that. They need to be part of your repository and published as part of your website. Okay. So now we've got both of our websites published, and now anytime we make any changes to our website content, let's actually try that out really quickly just to verify that that works. I'm going to go back to temp / my org website / content / index.org. Here is a new change to our websites. And then I'll go back to the shell, git add -a, git commit m. Let's test a change. I'm going to commit that. I'm going to run git push origin master. I'm also going to put, whoops, though, I got to do the login dance here really quickly. If you set up your authentication correctly, you will not have to do this. So this is just my own little problem to deal with right now. Okay, so I pushed that one. Git push, let's see, SRHT master also. I'm going to push both of those. Now let's go back here. I'm going to refresh this site really quickly. Right now, it does not have that message that we just put here because it has not had a chance to finish that CI job yet. Same thing for GitHub. So if I go check out our builds page for SourceHut, we can see that another job is now running to publish that change that I just pushed to my website. And as soon as these jobs on both of these sites are done, we should be able to see this change that I made immediately on the site. And this is the way that I publish all of these System Crafters websites. I have a set of org files. When I make changes to those org files, I commit them to a repository, and then these build systems generate the new site and then publish them for me. And I don't have to do anything like, SSH into a server and copy files over or anything like that. It all just happens automatically. So let me go refresh this page, and now we see the new message. Here is a new change to our websites. GitHub may not be finished yet. Probably not, so let's go back to that repo. davidwill2. Let's see, GitHub, whoops. github.com/davidwill2. I'll go to that repository. I will look at the Actions tab. So I think that one's finished now. Let's actually refresh it. So here's a new change to our website. So all we had to do is just add a line to one of our pages, add the file, commit it, push it to our repository, and then the build system automatically published it for us. So that's all you have to do if you want to have a website with org mode. All right, so custom domains. So both of these services actually allow you to set up a custom domain to your website. So if you want to actually have whatever .com that you want or any other domain that you want, you can actually point those to your personal website. I'm not going to go into detail about how to do that because the documentation pages for both GitHub and SourceHut cover this pretty well. If you just follow these two links below for whichever platform that you use, you should be able to set up a custom domain. However, I did want to mention that if you want a cool way to support the channel and you don't have a domain yet, you can actually buy one from namecheap.com using my affiliate link here. So if you want to support the channel, click that link there and buy a domain, and I'll get some percentage of it. I don't really know how much, but that could be one way to help the channel. But yeah, this is what I do. I basically have, various different domains pointing to either GitHub Pages or SourceHut Pages. Like my config website, config.davidwill.com points to SourceHut, systemcrackers.net points to GitHub Pages, and you can do that however you want. It's very easy, actually. All right, so I hope you enjoy your new site, and hopefully these instructions actually help you to get a new site running using Emacs org mode and Git. Let me know in the comments if you have any trouble or any questions. I'll be happy to help. In future videos of this series, we'll learn how to customize a style of org mode sites and also add useful features like RSS feeds and sitemaps and a lot of other cool stuff. So if there's anything else that you're interested to see how to do with org mode and websites, leave a note in the comments below or find me on System Crackers IRC or Discords. Check out the link to that in the description below as well. And as always, until next time, thanks so much for watching and happy hacking. We'll see ya.